Jiang Shengsheng gave all her best youth to Lu Mingfei, but who knew that the man would cruelly abandon her? At this time, she met another man. When she lay in the arms of another man, Lu Mingfei, who had always ignored Jiang Shengsheng, realized how wrong he was. When the wind was biting cold in early winter in Yueqing, it was rare to see a little sunshine in Haishe. The flowers in the yard were already showing signs of withering, and Fu Jinyan didn't want them to die, so he insisted on watering them every few days. When Jiang Shengsheng has nothing to do, she likes to curl up on the sofa and watch TV, while her cat rolls around at her feet with its belly exposed. Fu Jinyan pushed the door open after watering the flowers. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but come forward and stroke the cat's belly a few times. Shengsheng, you haven't given your cat a name yet, right? Jiang Shengsheng didn't take his eyes off the TV. He hummed, I happened to see it when I first arrived in town, and I picked it up. Shall we give it a name? She then turned her eyes away from the TV and looked at Fu Jinyan with a half smile, are you sure? Once some things leave their names in life, they are difficult to be forgotten. Perhaps the speaker was unintentional, but the listener was intentional, and the smile on Fu Jinyan's face disappeared little by little. She might be talking about the cat, or she might be talking about herself. Maybe, we should just treat it as an encounter, neither of us should leave our names, and it would be best if we each returned to the crowd when leaving. Jiang Shengsheng changed his sitting position, picked up the remote control, turned 2 channels forward and started listening to the news. Mr. Lu Mingfei, a well-known young entrepreneur in Yueqing, is getting married soon. It is reported that Mr. Lu will hold a grand wedding in Yueqing, and the bride is suspected to be the company secretary. Even the gossip news are saying that this is a perfect Cinderella come true. Jiang Shengsheng smiled silently. There are not so many people in this world who will not divorce their wives after sharing their hardships. The reality is that most people get tired of the old and love the new. Lu Mingfei is indeed going to marry someone else. This is his solution to the problem. Even in this situation, he is still protecting Zhou Yun. A heavy snow had fallen in Yueqing, and the originally bustling city seemed to have become quiet because of the snow. Lu Mingfei stood in front of the French window in front of the office, lost in thought for a moment as he watched the vehicles moving slowly forward due to the accumulation of snow below. There was a knock on the office door. Come in. Secretary Yang came in from outside with a large stack of lists in his hand. Mr. Lu, this is the wedding guest list. Take a look. Do you want to send a message to the 2 presidents of Fu Group? After all, the business of Fu Group used to be followed by Miss Jiang, and now the cooperation with us is about to expire. Lu Mingfei was silent for a moment. Send it, maybe we can continue to discuss cooperation. Yes. Secretary Yang hesitated for a moment, and then said, also. Miss Zhou is still not satisfied with the wedding venue. She also hopes to change her wedding dress to a custom-made one from Italy, but it seems that there is no time. Hearing this, Lu Mingfei frowned. Don't worry about her, there are too many things to do. To be honest, if Zhou Yun wasn't pregnant with his child, he would never have agreed to marry her. He had no expectations for the wedding, but he would occasionally think that the woman he had vowed to give him a grand wedding when he was young had disappeared from his life. The temperature in High City is not low in winter, but in the coastal town, the temperature becomes cooler as soon as the sea breeze blows and the next rain falls. It has been raining recently, so Jiang Shengsheng can't lie in the yard to bask in the sun and can only curl up on the sofa and watch TV. Ever since Fu Jinyan came, the arduous task of feeding the cats and cooking fell on him. But he is a rich second generation who has been spoiled since childhood. He is okay at feeding cats, but cooking is really difficult for him. Smelling the smell of burnt food coming from the kitchen, Jiang Shengsheng sat up from the sofa and said, why don't we stop cooking and order takeout instead? Fu Jinyan's voice came from the kitchen, no, takeout is not nutritious. Wait, what I make today will definitely be better than yesterday. Jiang Shengsheng didn't insist. No matter what he did, she couldn't eat anything. There was the sound of a car passing by outside the door, and soon someone knocked on the door. Jiang Shengsheng had no strength left and lay on the sofa without moving. Fu Jinyan came out of the kitchen, wiped his hands and went to open the door. Brother, you're here. Quick, how do you make these spare ribs? Hearing the sound, Jiang Shengsheng sat up from the sofa, but only saw half of Fu Jinji's head, and the 2 of them went into the kitchen together. She didn't even have time to say hello. After a while, a tempting aroma came from the kitchen. Jiang Shengsheng looked towards the kitchen with a faint smile on his face. She couldn't remember how long it had been since someone had accompanied her like this. She once thought she had gotten used to living alone, but now this kind of worldly life suddenly made her reluctant to leave this world. How wonderful it is to be alive. You can eat delicious food, see scenery you have never seen, and meet people you want to meet. But she just buried herself in the sofa and closed her eyes for a while. She hasn't eaten anything recently. Although she has taken painkillers, the pain has become increasingly unbearable when it strikes. She knew very well that she had less and less time left, and she didn't want to be attached to this world anymore, otherwise, she was afraid that she would feel unwilling when she really left. Jiang Shengsheng. Come on, my brother cooked the ribs himself, you must try them. Fu Jinyan had a loud voice and woke Jiang Shengsheng up immediately. Jiang Shengsheng sat for too long and suddenly had no strength left in his body, so he could only lie on the sofa to relax. What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Fu Jinji seemed to sense something was wrong and stepped forward to help her sit up. This was the first time Jiang Shengsheng heard this person speak so gently. She was stunned for a moment before she forced a smile on her face. Nothing, I just got sleepy from watching TV. It was the first time the three of them sat at the same table to eat together, but the atmosphere was inexplicably heavy. Jiang Shengsheng lowered his head and took a few small bites. He couldn't eat any more. Fu Jinji sat across from her without eating a single bite. After a long while, he asked, why don't we go to the hospital? If we receive treatment, maybe we'll get better. Jiang Shengsheng paused with the chopsticks in his hand, looked up and smiled at the two people opposite him, then slowly stood up. I'm full. I'll go upstairs first. She seemed to have heard nothing of Fu Jinji's words. There were only two people left at the table, but no one was in the mood to eat. The two of them sat there in silence, before a hint of heaviness appeared on their faces. After a long while, Fu Jinyan asked, brother, this disease won't be cured, right? Fu Jinji remained silent. The soundproofing of the house is not very good, and I can vaguely hear the sounds of vomiting and flushing in the bathroom upstairs. Fu Jinji leaned back in his chair, and his usually calm eyes began to ripple, mixed with many unspeakable emotions. Fu Jinyan smiled bitterly. It's a pity, she is the friend who understands me the most over the years. Then he turned to look at Fu Jinji and asked, what about you? Brother, who is she to you? There was still no expression on Fu Jinji's face. He just stood up, picked up his coat and walked out the door. He opened the door. It was still raining outside. He looked up at the dark sky and said calmly, I am nothing. After that day, Fu Jinji never came again, Jiang Shengsheng never asked, and Fu Jinyan tacitly never mentioned it. During the day, she played with the cat, watched TV on the sofa with Fu Jinyan, took a nap when she felt sleepy, and walked to the pub in the evening to sit and listen to people singing in the evening breeze. Song Chan happily told her how much money she had earned that day. But she had no interest in most of the time, and half a month passed in this dull manner. One day half a month later, the weather was particularly cold. Fu Jinyan got up and watched TV for half an hour. There was no sound from upstairs. He called for a long time but there was no response. When he went upstairs and entered Jiang Shengsheng's bedroom, he could only see Jiang Shengsheng lying motionless on the floor beside the bed. Blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth, staining a large area of the floor red. For a moment, he felt like his breathing was about to stop. He picked her up and found that her body was almost cold. He was a little at a loss and quickly called Fu Jinji. Fu Jinji happened to be nearby and arrived in less than 10 minutes, but the ambulance was delayed due to traffic jam caused by rain. He saw Jiang Shengsheng lying there soundlessly. Without saying a word, he took out a blanket from her closet, wrapped her up, and hurriedly put her in the car in the rain. He honked the horn all the way, speeding in the heavy rain, ignoring red lights and all rationality. Fortunately, Fu Jinyan discovered it in time and the person was rescued safely. Fortunately, cancer is a disease that gives people enough time to say goodbye. I don't know how long I slept, but when Jiang Shengsheng woke up, it was dark outside. When I opened my eyes, I saw the pale ceiling and my nose was filled with the smell of disinfectant. Woke up? She didn't expect that the first person she saw when she woke up would be Fu Jinji. Fu Jinji always wore a suit and tie, his hair was meticulously groomed, and even his clothes were never wrinkled. But now, Fu Jinji in front of him had his tie half loosened, his hair was a little messy as if it had been rained on, there was a circle of faint blue stubble on his chin, and he looked a little depressed. The door of the ward was suddenly pushed open, and Fu Jinyan came in with a pile of bills in his hand. Brother, the hospitalization procedures have been completed. Fu Jinji said and poured a cup of hot water and handed it to Jiang Shengsheng. Jiang Shengsheng didn't answer, but looked at Fu Jinyan. Jinyan, I don't want to be hospitalized. Fu Jinji put down his water cup and said in a serious tone that did not allow for any refusal, you must be hospitalized. Jiang Shengsheng frowned unhappily, I won't be hospitalized. This is a meaningless treatment. But this was the first time Fu Jinji spoke to her in such a strong tone, life itself is the meaning, you must receive treatment. Jiang Shengsheng's eyes darkened, and his tone was just as stiff, but you have no right to control my life. The air seemed to be frozen at this moment, and a chill penetrated into my lungs through the window. After a while, Fu Jinji walked out of the ward without saying a word. His back no longer seemed so straight. Snap! The door closed softly. Fu Jinyan, who had not interrupted, stepped forward and said, Shengsheng, you shouldn't say such things to my brother. We hope that you can be hospitalized for good treatment. Even if it's not for a miracle, we want you to see this world more. Jiang Shengsheng turned his head and said, Jinyan, I won't be better anymore. Fu Jinyan saw tears sliding down Jiang Shengsheng's face. She raised her hand and wiped them away hastily, then shrank her nose. After a long time, Jiang Shengsheng calmed down, took a deep breath, and forced out a smile that was uglier than crying. Jinyan, I really want to live, but you don't know that the longer we live, the deeper the bond between people, and the sadder it will be when we separate. I don't want the living to be sad for me anymore. Fu Jinyan opened his mouth to refute, but when he opened his mouth, no words came out. The deeper the feelings between people, the harder it is to give up. But what if the relationship itself is hard to give up? Fu Jinyan paused. There are always people in this world who love you that you don't know about. I hope you live longer. After staying in the hospital for 2 days, Jiang Shengsheng insisted on being discharged. Fu Jinyan couldn't persuade her and could only follow her back, but he was still angry and refused to talk to her. After that day, Jiang Shengsheng didn't see Fu Jinji for several days. He didn't know whether he was too busy or he simply didn't want to see her again. As the sun came out, Jiang Shengsheng's health seemed to be a little better than before, but his face was still as pale as paper. She sat on the balcony and poured herself a cup of hot tea, while her cat slept quietly at her feet. The courtyard door was pushed open with a creaking sound. The cat was frightened and stood up and wanted to run, but when it found out that the person coming was Fu Jinyan, it lay down again. Fu Jinyan carried the vegetables he had just bought and gave Jiang Shengsheng a displeased look. The weather is still cold, can't you wear something thicker? Jiang Shengsheng curled the corners of his mouth and smiled at him, it's not cold. Fu Jinyan was sulking and ignored him, going straight into the kitchen. After this period of experience, his cooking skills have improved a lot and he can be considered to have some accomplishments in this area. The kitchen was bustling with noise. Jiang Shengsheng listened from afar, the smile on his face gradually fading. She clearly didn't want to create ties in this world, but she inexplicably couldn't bear to live like this. She had been so lonely in the past few years that she didn't want to go back to the way things were. She is too conflicted now and can only live each day in a daze. After sitting for a long time, she entered the house only when she heard the noises from the kitchen were almost over. As soon as she entered the room, she saw a big red and gold embossed wedding invitation thrown on the table. Although she didn't want to pay attention to it, she still accidentally glanced at the 3 big words Lu Mingfei written on the cover. Jiang Shengsheng was stunned for a moment and picked it up to look at it. This is the wedding invitation of Lu Mingfei and Zhou Yun. The photo of the two of them is showing them smiling brightly. She couldn't help but clench her palms, and a feeling of soreness surged in her heart. It was clearly her who accompanied Lu Mingfei to his current position, but in the end, others just reaped the benefits. She felt aggrieved for herself. What are you looking at? They're getting married, and it's none of your business. Fu Jinyan came out of the kitchen and took the invitation from her hand. Sometimes, Fu Jinyan is really rude. There was no expression on Jiang Shengsheng's face. He just nodded lightly and went into the kitchen to wash his hands and prepare for dinner. Seeing that she didn't react, Fu Jinyan raised his eyebrows. Don't you want to go and take a look? Jiang Shengsheng washed his hands but did not say anything. You're willing to let this pair of bastards get together so easily? If it were me, I would discuss him to death. Jiang Shengsheng then looked at Fu Jinyan, and it was definitely true that he was unwilling. It is said that those who plant trees will enjoy the shade, but the shade they are enjoying is hurting her heart. Moreover, she had been away from Lu Mingfei for such a long time, but Lu Mingfei had never looked for her, which made those 8 years seem ridiculous. What can I do if I am willing? What can I do if I am not willing? Fu Jinyan stepped forward and said, that's easy. Lu Mingfei invited me and my brother to attend. I'll take you with me then. Just as he finished speaking, he heard a familiar car sound coming from outside. Fu Jinyan reacted immediately. My brother is here. He went on a business trip abroad recently, and he just got off the plane and came here. There was no joy on Jiang Shengsheng's face. He turned and went into the kitchen to get another set of bowls and chopsticks. Fu Jinji came alone again, and this time he brought a lot of things, carrying them in bag by bag. They were all tonics and medicinal herbs. Only a pair of cute minions dolls were the most pleasing. Fu Jinyan, who was standing by, couldn't help but complain after seeing the pile of things in front of him. Brother, are you going to open a grocery store? How can you give these things to girls? But Fu Jinji simply ignored his words, took out the things in his hand one by one, and reminded, this is to improve immunity, this can supplement vitamins, and this. Jiang Shengsheng couldn't help but chuckled as he listened to his serious introduction. Fu Jinji raised his eyes to look at her. What's wrong? Nothing, I just realized now that Brother Fu is not actually a cold person. It seems that I misunderstood before. Fu Jinji's face flashed with surprise, and then he smiled. Then it's not too late to get to know me from now on. Seeing that the atmosphere was just right, Fu Jinyan came forward and suggested, then Jiang Shengsheng, you can attend Lu Mingfei's wedding as my brother's girlfriend. In the end, before Jiang Shengsheng could even open his mouth to refuse this proposal, Fu Jinji, on the side casually responded. It's all right. I don't mind. Fu Jinyan, okay, that's settled then. Jiang Shengsheng stood there in a daze. For some reason, she felt as if someone had plotted against her. Lu Mingfei's wedding invited many big names in the business world. It was more of a business event than a wedding. When leaving High City by plane, Jiang Shengsheng was still thinking about how she should appear at Lu Mingfei's wedding. She is now the daughter of the Jiang family in Nanqing, and even appearing at their wedding is giving them face. But in the final analysis, she just wanted to give herself an explanation when she returned this time. Okay, Jiang Shengsheng, don't look so sad. Just wait and see. God will punish the wicked. Lu Mingfei will not get the beauty so easily. When Fu Jinyan saw that she looked unhappy, he knew that it was because of Lu Mingfei. Jiang Shengsheng glanced at Fu Jinji who was sitting next to him. He had his eyes closed and seemed to have fallen asleep. She took a quick glance and gestured to Fu Jinyan to keep quiet. Fu Jinyan finally shut up and the three of them went to Yueqing. The winter in Yueqing is very cold, and the trees on the streets have lost all their leaves. Lu Mingfei stood in front of the window of the villa, without any sign of newlywed joy on his face. He stared blankly at a ginkgo tree in the yard, and suddenly remembered that for many past autumns, Jiang Shengsheng liked to sit under that tree and read. Mr. Lu, the funeral home has called several times, asking when you can pick up Miss Zhang's ashes stored there? Secretary Yang's voice suddenly brought his thoughts back to reality. He suddenly remembered that the woman had left him, almost 2 months ago. He couldn't help but think that time passed so slowly. But he turned around, as if he hadn't heard Secretary Yang's words, and asked, have you arranged the seats for the wedding? It's already been arranged. I heard that Mr. Fu will bring his fiancée to the wedding this time, which is considered to be a great honor. Hearing this, Lu Mingfei frowned slightly. Is it Mr. Fu or Mr. Fu? Everyone distinguished the two brothers of the Fu family by their age, calling Fu Jinji Mr. Fu and Fu Jinyan little Mr. Fu. Mr. Fu. Lu Mingfei showed a hint of surprise. He actually has a fiancée? You have to know that Fu Jinji is well known for not being interested in women. After so many years of dominating the business world, he doesn't even have a female assistant, let alone a girlfriend. Secretary Yang nodded and said, yes, I believe that Mr. Fu values his fiancée very much. If we can build a good relationship with his fiancée this time, it should not be a problem to renew the contract with Fu's next year. Lu Mingfei didn't understand this kind of social interaction with wives. In the past, Jiang Shengsheng took care of everything for him. Well, when the time comes, these will be handed over to Zhou Yun. She is the hostess, so she is just right. Okay, Mr. Lu. Jiang Shengsheng and the other two arrived in Yueqing and stayed at Fenghua Hotel. This hotel is the best hotel in Yueqing and is also one of the properties under the name of Fu Group. The hotel's high-rise suites are luxury rooms that occupy an entire floor, and those who usually come and go here are all wealthy people. Jiang Shengsheng was not feeling well, and Fu Jinyan said that he had an appointment with a young model in the evening. As a result, he insisted on letting her share a room with Fu Jinji, under the pretext of taking care of her. Fu Jinji glanced at her and reached out to her. Jiang Shengsheng was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but take a step back. Then, Fu Jinji's lips tightened slightly. He took the suitcase from her hand, and said in a calm voice, go upstairs. It turned out that he was helping her with her luggage. She thought. Realizing that his thoughts were a little confused, Jiang Shengsheng couldn't help blushing, feeling quite embarrassed. Seeing Fu Jinji waiting for her patiently not far away, she took small steps forward. As soon as he entered the elevator, Jiang Shengsheng looked up and was about to say something to Fu Jinji to ease the awkward atmosphere, but he happened to see a familiar figure passing by the elevator door. Why is she here? Jiang Shengsheng couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. The elevator door has closed and the two people who walked hand in hand are no longer visible. Fu Jinji looked at her sideways. What's wrong? Jiang Shengsheng retracted his gaze and frowned. Nothing, I met an acquaintance. Zhou Yun, isn't this an old acquaintance of hers? But Zhou Yun was about to get married, so why would she appear in the hotel with a strange man? The hotel's top-floor presidential suite was much larger than Jiang Shengsheng had imagined. There are 2 bedrooms. The master bedroom has its own private bathroom, the living room is very large, there is also a game room and a video room, so there is no embarrassment of living in the same room. After sitting on the plane for half a day, it is now dark. When Jiang Shengsheng came out of the shower, he saw the lights outside the window just coming on. It was the busiest time of the year in the city. She stood in front of the window for a while. She was already very familiar with this city, and it had hardly changed from what she remembered. Like many times before, the lights outside the window were bright, but to her, it was filled with coldness. This is the deepest memory this city left her. At this moment, the mobile phone screen lit up. It was the hotel service, reminding her that dinner was about to be served. Did she want to eat now? She confirmed it and left the bedroom to ask Fu Jinji to have dinner together. But when she walked into the living room, she saw Fu Jinji leaning on the sofa with his eyes lowered. When she got closer, she could already hear his even breathing. Fu Jingji has always been a very self-controlled person. If he wasn't extremely tired, he wouldn't fall asleep leaning on the sofa. There is heater in the room, but when people fall asleep their body temperature drops, so I'm afraid of catching a cold in this cold winter. Jiang Shengsheng went back to the room and took out a blanket she had brought with her to cover him. When she got closer, she found that there was a faint circle of dark circles under Fu Jingji's eyes, and his eyebrows and eyes showed fatigue. But even so, he still slept very well. It was the first time for her to look at him so closely. Normally, even if he was right in front of her, she would not dare to look at him so carefully. I always heard Fu Jinyan say before that his brother was very busy, with endless meetings to attend and endless worries, and he couldn't even have time for 3 meals a day. But now, he was actually willing to accompany her to her ex-boyfriend's wedding as her boyfriend? If this is because of her good relationship with Fu Jinyan, isn't it a bit unreasonable? After all, Fu Jingji is not such a boring person and is not someone who is willing to give face. Ding dong! The doorbell rang suddenly, scaring Jiang Shengsheng so much that the blanket in his hand slipped to the ground before he could cover himself. She quickly squatted down to pick it up, and the next second someone grabbed her wrist again. Fu Jingji bowed slightly, picked up the blanket on the ground and handed it to her. There was no unnecessary expression on his face throughout the whole process. This made Jiang Shengsheng feel a little embarrassed, and he quickly explained, Brother Fu. I saw that you fell asleep, and I was afraid that you would catch a cold, so. If she was thought to be peeking at him, she would really have to find a hole to crawl into. Unexpectedly, Fu Jingji smiled at her and said, I know, you must be hungry. Let's have dinner. Jiang Shengsheng still felt a little nervous having dinner alone with Fu Jingji in the same room, so she had no choice but to lower her head and drink a few mouthfuls of porridge in silence. Are you afraid of me? Fu Jingji, who was sitting opposite her, suddenly asked her. Jiang Shengsheng looked up in astonishment and quickly shook his head. No, it's just that Brother Fu, you are very busy every day, and I am afraid to disturb you. One of our subsidiaries is busy with its IPO recently. I will have some free time after this period. Do you want to go abroad then? She didn't swallow a mouthful of porridge and almost choked. What? Fu Jingji smiled at her and said, after the wedding, come with me? Jiang Shengsheng was stunned again. What does this mean? But Fu Jingji did not answer. He wiped his mouth gracefully and turned his head to look at the night scene outside the window. It's getting late. Jinyan probably won't come to see you today. Go to bed early. If you feel uncomfortable, call me. I'm next door. Perhaps it was because the hotel had sufficient heating, Jiang Shengsheng suddenly felt a warmth rising all over his body. Ever since the 2 brothers of the Fu family appeared in her life didn't seem so bad anymore. At night, the cold wind was raging outside the window, but Jiang Shengsheng, for the first time ever, stayed in the hotel room and had a good sleep. The next day, she was still awakened by Fu Jinyan's rough banging on the door. Jiang Shengsheng, wake up! Big news! Jiang Shengsheng's head was still feeling dizzy, so he got up sleepily and opened the door. What's wrong? Lu Mingfei's fiancé has someone else outside. Lu Mingfei is so green. This news completely made Jiang Shengsheng lose all desire to sleep. Are you sure you didn't see it wrong? Jiang Shengsheng asked with some disbelief. Unexpectedly, Fu Jinyan looked very confident. The little actress I dated yesterday knows Lu Mingfei's fiancé. Her name is Zhou Yun, right? We saw them in person yesterday. They were taking a hot spring bath together in the backyard and they were hugging and kissing each other. Jiang Shengsheng almost laughed out loud at his words. It seemed that what she saw in the hotel yesterday was true. Jiang Shengsheng didn't know whether she should be happy or sad. She had been with Lu Mingfei for 8 years, but in the end it was all in vain. Lu Mingfei actually betrayed everything between them for such a person. Her face turned pale, and she forced a smile. Is that so? It seems that he is just like me, blind and heartless. Seeing that Jiang Shengsheng looked unhappy, Fu Jinyan realized that he shouldn't have mentioned that person, and he quickly put on a smile and changed the subject. There's nothing to do today, let's go for a walk and get some fresh air, it should be good for your health. Knowing that Fu Jinyan was doing this for her own good, she couldn't bear to refuse. She turned around and wanted to go into the room to change her clothes, but suddenly she remembered something. Where's Brother Fu? Isn't he going with us? Fu Jinyan frowned and smiled. This is the first time you asked about my brother. He thought you didn't like being with him, so he didn't want to go. Jiang Shengsheng denied without thinking. No, Brother Fu is a very nice person. He rarely came to Yueqing before. I can take him for a walk. Fu Jinyan spread his hands. No other way, I'll go call him. When going out, Jiang Shengsheng wore a sweater with a long woolen coat on the outside. She looked warm, but as soon as she went out, the cold wind blew into her neck, making her shiver uncontrollably. Put it on! Put it on! Suddenly, the 2 brothers took off their scarves in unison and handed them to her. Jiang Shengsheng was secretly shocked and suddenly felt a little at a loss when looking at the 2 scarves in front of her. No need for a scarf, I'm not cold, really not cold. As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Jinyan took the scarf from Fu Jinji's hand, raised his hand and wrapped the scarf around Jiang Shengsheng's neck twice. You're welcome. You should wear my brother's scarf. I'm more afraid of the cold, so I won't give it to you. This person. Jiang Shengsheng choked back his words and secretly glanced at Fu Jinji. There was less coldness between his eyebrows than usual, and the look in his eyes when he looked at her seemed to have a hint of imperceptible tenderness. He seems in a good mood today. Jiang Shengsheng lowered his head and sniffed. He could still smell the faint mint scent on the scarf, which was the scent of brother Fu. She straightened the scarf around her neck, looked at Fu Jinji with a complicated look, and then laughed at herself. I've been thinking a lot lately. Who is Fu Jinji? Why would he? Zigzag Shopping Mall is the largest leisure place in Yueqing and a den for the wealthy in Yueqing to spend money. In addition to shopping malls, entertainment cities, golf courses, fishing platforms, and gliding bases, there are also a series of amusement parks. It is said that this piece of land was bought by the Jiang family in Nanqing and is very famous in Yueqing. Originally, the atmosphere was a bit strange as we were just 3 people together. Fortunately, Fu Jinyan is a chatterbox and can talk non-stop no matter what he sees. On the contrary, Fu Jinji spoke very little. He would only smile and ask a few more questions when Jiang Shengsheng talked to him about the characteristics and fun places of the city. The 3 of them visited the tower and the indoor rose garden and had a great time. However, Fu Jinji seldom goes out like this, which results in several young girls coming up to chat with him when he is having a meal in a restaurant. However, the girls who came to chat came excitedly but left disappointed. It was only after they arrived at the box that things became a little quieter. Brother, what did you say to those girls when you rejected them just now? They didn't give up so quickly before. Fu Jinji gave him a cold look and said expressionlessly, I said, I have a fiancé. Puff Fu Jinyan almost spit out a mouthful of water, choked twice, and then extended a thumbs up. Jiang Shengsheng felt embarrassed at first, but seeing Fu Jinji's calm attitude, she realized that she was being too sensitive. As he was speaking, the waiter knocked on the door and came in. Excuse me, are you Miss Jiang Shengsheng? Jiang Shengsheng was confused, but still nodded, I am. Miss Jiang, Mr. Jiang is here too. Would it be convenient for you to have dinner with him? Since the elders asked, it was difficult for them as the younger generations to refuse. Besides, the old man was old and he traveled so far just to be closer to his granddaughter. The old man had long wanted to improve his relationship with Jiang Shengsheng, but seeing that they were a few young people together today, he didn't want to spoil their fun, so he came just when it was time for dinner. Mr. Jiang is in high spirits today as he is accompanied by his granddaughter. Shengsheng, is there anything else you like? Jewels, clothes, bags, as long as it's something you like, just tell Grandpa and I'll have someone send it to you later. Out of his debt to his daughter over the years, the old man now pours almost all his love on his granddaughter Jiang Shengsheng. Although Jiang Shengsheng felt happy because of the feeling of being favored, but this was a little too exaggerated. Grandpa, I'm just staying here for a while and I'll be staying in a hotel. I don't need so many things, so it's better not to buy them. Jiang Shengsheng still felt a little awkward calling him Grandpa. Mr. Jiang immediately frowned. How can that be? I, Jiang Zongnan's granddaughter, can't bear any more grievances. This little thing is nothing. When you return to South City in the future, Grandpa will have more good things to give you. After saying that, Mr. Jiang glanced at Fu Jinji beside him, and then lowered his voice and asked Jiang Shengsheng, I heard that this kid from the Fu family is your fiancé? How is he? Is he good to you? Jiang Shengsheng was stumped by this question, but he really didn't know how to explain it, so he could only nod and say, very good. The old man nodded with satisfaction, this guy has good taste. So when are you planning to get married? The old man couldn't be more satisfied with Fu Jinji, his grandson-in-law. As for marriage, it's not decided yet. The old man did not ask too much, and nodded in understanding. You young people should discuss yourselves, but you have to hurry up, you are old enough, and Grandpa still wants to see you get married and live a stable and happy life in the future. Jiang Shengsheng could only smile along, as the old man still didn't know what his illness was. It is not easy to live a peaceful and happy life. After dinner, Jiang Shengsheng was not in good spirits. Fu Jinji noticed it keenly and found a reason to take her back to rest. As soon as he got in the car, Jiang Shengsheng sat in the back seat, closed his eyes and rested, and soon fell asleep. I slept soundly. It seems that I am in a good mood today. Fu Jinji, who was driving in front, glanced in the rearview mirror and lowered his voice. She's been running around outside for too long today, she's very tired, let her sleep. Fu Jinyan then sighed, leaned back in his chair, and a trace of fatigue appeared on his face. Fu Jinji slowed down the car and asked calmly, Jinyan, you said you have known her for 5 years and have always had a good relationship with her. In these 5 years, have you always treated her as just a friend? These words made Fu Jinyan's expression change slightly, and then he showed a cynical smile. Of course we're just friends. I already told you she's my best friend. Hearing this, Fu Jinji hummed softly and stopped talking. The atmosphere in the car suddenly became inexplicably depressing. Fu Jinyan turned his head to look at the flowing scenery outside the window and asked Fu Jinji, "Brother, do you like her so much?" After a moment's silence, Fu Jinji still just hummed lightly. "Even if you have to watch her die, even if you will suffer for a long, long time in the future, you still have to continue to love her?" That's something I can't do. I will never fall in love with someone who may leave me at any time. Brother, you said that one should be sober and rational in life. Fu Jinyan said this with a smile. But the expression on Fu Jinji's face remained unchanged, and he still said hum lightly. The liking he expressed was very consistent with his appearance, as if both were light and frivolous. But no one knows that for Fu Jinji, how deep his love must be for him to be so bold as to admit his unreserved love for her. As for Jiang Shengsheng, you know, I have liked her for many years. Light bar. The lights in the bar were shaking, and young men and women were dancing enthusiastically in the middle of the dance floor, creating a noisy scene. Lu Mingfei sat in a box outside the dance floor, watching the lively dance floor and taking a sip of wine. "Mingfei, today is your last single night. Why are you so depressed?" The man in white clothes next to him came forward and asked. The yellow-haired guy, on the other side, heard something wrong and said, "You don't understand. Our general manager Lu is busy with work every day and never comes to places like this. He must be thinking about how to attract Mr. Jiang's investment at this time." Hearing the word Jiang, Lu Mingfei seemed to be poked somewhere, and frowned as he came back to his senses. "What, Mr. Jiang?" Huang Mao continued, "You don't know about such a big thing? The old man from the Jiang family in Nanqing said he came to Yueqing to look for someone. Everyone knows that the old man has a big order in hand. How many people are trying to get in touch with the old man now?" Lu Mingfei nodded. If he could get involved in the Jiang family's business in Nanqing, his career would naturally be further developed. However, this is really not an easy task. He pondered for a moment, and suddenly thought of Jiang Shengsheng again. In the past, when encountering such a situation, Jiang Shengsheng would take the initiative to help him win partners. She could drink and speak beautifully, and many orders were negotiated by her. At that time, he also knew that those bosses were actually attracted by Jiang Shengsheng's face and wanted to take advantage of her. But he mostly turned a blind eye and despised himself more and more. He relied on women to get out of the trough. So he has been working very hard over the years just to get rid of this label and prove that he is capable. As for his feelings for Jiang Shengsheng, he will forget about it. He will forget about that person and start his new life. He drank the last sip of wine in the glass and stood up suddenly. "You guys have fun, I have something else to do, so I'll leave first." I went out and took a taxi, but the destination was a funeral home. It was quite creepy to come to this place so late at night. When the staff took him to collect the ashes, they cursed him under their breath and called him sick. But Lu Mingfei seemed not to hear it. When he came out of the funeral home, it started snowing heavily again. The snow fluttered down and gently landed on the surface of the box. Lu Mingfei slowly brushed off the snowflakes. His tone was rarely so gentle. "Shengsheng, I'm getting married tomorrow, it's time to send you off." But if she were still here, this wedding should have belonged to the two of them. Thinking of this, for a moment, he felt a pang of bitterness in his heart, but he couldn't tell what kind of emotion it was. He would only occasionally think of Jiang Shengsheng, and then a trace of regret would arise in his heart. After all, that was 8 years of companionship. How could it be that I really had never loved her? It was snowing heavily, and Lu Mingfei returned to the villa where Jiang Shengsheng used to live. After Zhou Yun asked him to buy her a new villa, he never came back. There is no longer any atmosphere of Jiang Shengsheng's life here, but for some reason, the closer the wedding date gets, the deeper the memory of Jiang Shengsheng becomes in his mind. Lu Mingfei placed the urn on the table and leaned back on the sofa, suddenly feeling more tired than ever before. In the past, Jiang Shengsheng would cook him a bowl of hot noodles when he was tired, and he would feel extremely satisfied every time after eating it. But now, looking at the empty house, he felt so sad that he was speechless. And tomorrow, he is getting married.